I'm Maren Voss. I'm 33. 4 weeks ago, my sister-in-law set a sonogram on my kitchen table, face up, like she was laying down a winning hand. "I know this is hard for you," she said, "after everything, but I thought you should hear it from me before the lawyers do." I looked at the photo for exactly 3 seconds. Then I looked at the date stamp in the corner, and I felt something in my chest go very, very still, the way a room goes still right before someone says a word they can't take back. Because I recognized that sonogram. I'd seen it before, 11 months before her 12 weeks began. Before I tell you what I did with that 1 second of recognition, you need to understand what it cost me to notice it at all. Where are you listening from? Drop your city below. I read everyone, and this story is about to move fast. 8 years ago, I married Theo Calloway in the courtyard of his family's vineyard outside Walla Walla. His grandmother's ring went on my finger that day, a green gold emerald his great-great-grandmother had carried out of Hungary in 1948, sewn into the hem of a coat. 4 generations of women had worn that stone. His grandmother told me, holding both my hands, "It only goes to someone who stays." I didn't know yet that someone who stays would become the standard I'd be measured against and found short of. We tried for 3 years to have a baby. I won't walk you through every appointment, every hallway, every time a nurse said, "I'm so sorry," in that particular gentle voice they're trained to use. I'll just tell you this. By year 3, I'd stopped crying in the car after. I'd started just driving home in silence, which scared me more than the crying ever had. Theo's sister, Paige, started showing up around then, bringing soup, doing the dishes, sitting a little too close on the couch, asking a few too many questions about timelines and procedures and how I was really holding up. I thought she was being kind. I was wrong about almost everything that year, but I was most wrong about that. 6 months ago, Theo told me he wanted a divorce. He didn't say why at first, just that he'd found someone who understood what he needed. I assumed an affair. I packed a bag and went to my cousin's place in Spokane and let myself feel exactly as broken as I was. Then Paige called me, not Theo, Paige. "I didn't want you to hear it from someone else," she said. "It's me, Theo and I, we're together. And Maren, I'm pregnant." I sat on my cousin's kitchen floor for a long time after that call. Not because of the affair, because of the word together applied to my husband and his own sister, and the word pregnant applied to the one woman in this story who'd been telling me for 3 years she understood exactly how hard it was to not be. Here's the part I need you to sit with for a second. In some families, stepsister means something looser than blood. Paige wasn't my stepsister by paperwork. She was Theo's half-sister from his father's second marriage, not raised with him, barely known to him until 5 years ago, when his mother began quietly, deliberately, folding her back into the family. That detail matters. Hold on to it. I didn't fight the divorce filing. I let the lawyers handle the house, the accounts, the furniture. I told myself I had nothing left to protect. Then, 4 weeks ago, Paige drove 3 hours to bring me that sonogram herself, sat across my own kitchen table, the one I picked out, the one I'd hosted Thanksgiving at for 6 years, and told me she wanted me to hear it with kindness, not anger. She wanted a witness to her victory. That's what that visit was. I understand that now. But here's what she didn't expect. I used to work in medical billing, 6 years before the vineyard, before any of this. I know exactly what those corner stamps mean. Clinic code, date, patient initials. And the date on that sonogram put her at 11 weeks pregnant in March, 8 months before she ever told anyone she and Theo were together. I didn't say anything that day. I smiled, told her congratulations, and walked her to her car like a good ex-wife should. Then I went back inside and sat at that table for 40 minutes, just turning one question over and over. Was that a clerical error, or had I just watched a woman hand me proof of something she didn't know I could read? I think some of you already know which one it was. Tell me in the comments. A, clerical error, or B, she just made the first mistake of her life. I'll tell you which one it was in about 2 minutes. It was neither. It was worse. I called my friend Renee, who still works the front desk at the clinic where I used to process claims. I didn't ask her to break any law. I asked her one question. Is there a patient initials PC with an appointment around that date? She went quiet for a second. Then she said, "Marin, I really can't." "I'm not asking you to tell me anything," I said. "I'm asking you to tell me if I should call a lawyer." She paused again, then, "Call a lawyer." That's all I needed. Some doors only need to be cracked an inch for you to know what's behind them. I hired Devin Okafor, a family attorney 2 towns over who had a reputation for being quiet in negotiations and merciless in court. I told her everything: the timeline, the sonogram, the date stamp. She didn't blink. "Here's what we're going to do," she said. "We're not going to accuse anyone of anything. We're going to ask one question on the record at the settlement table and let the answer do the work." I asked her what question. She smiled for the first time since I'd met her. "We're going to ask her how far along she is, to the day." But before that meeting, something happened that I didn't see coming, something that turned this from a story about a lie into a story about a system. I was going through old family photos for the lawyer, trying to build a timeline, when I found a folder I'd forgotten existed. Pictures from a garden party Theo's mother, Cordelia, threw 5 years ago, the one where Paige first started coming around. In one photo, barely in frame at the edge of the table, was a printed seating chart in Cordelia's handwriting. At the bottom, in small letters, someone, Cordelia, had written a note to herself that I'd never noticed before, because 5 years ago it meant nothing to me. P, the right kind of daughter. Talk to her about the ring before Theo gets too attached to M. I read that line maybe 9 times, 5 years before any divorce, before any affair, before any sonogram. Someone had already decided I was the wrong woman wearing the right ring, and had started auditioning my replacement before I'd even done anything to deserve losing my place. I wasn't being left. I was being replaced on schedule. Devin didn't seem surprised when I showed her the photo. "Family money does this more than people think," she said. "There's almost always a sponsor. Find out who's been paying for things, and you'll find out who's been planning things." So we looked. 8 months of Paige's bank statements, pulled through Discovery once the divorce filing made financial disclosure mandatory. And there it was, 4 wire transfers from Cordelia's personal account into Paige's, totaling $22,000, starting the same month as that garden party photo. Memo lines: gift, gift, moving help, gift. A mother had been funding her own daughter's slow infiltration of her son's marriage for 5 years, one quiet transfer at a time. I want to ask you something because I think a lot of you already know the answer in your own life. When you find out the betrayal had a budget, that someone sat down and decided what your unraveling was worth, does that make it better or worse than if it had just happened by accident? Tell me below. I read every single one of these. The settlement meeting was set for a Tuesday morning in a glass-walled conference room downtown. I wore the green coat my mother left me, the only thing of hers I have that still smells faintly like her, even 9 years later. Paige walked in 11 minutes late, one hand resting on a belly that, by her own stated math, should have been 5 months along. Theo sat beside her. Cordelia sat across, already pouring water like she was hosting brunch. Devin didn't open with the photo. She didn't open with the bank records. She opened exactly the way she said she would. "Paige," she said, "for the record, how far along are you today? To the day, if you can." Paige smiled, rested her hand a little higher on her stomach, and said, 22 weeks, 3 days. Devin nodded slowly. Then she slid one piece of paper across the table. The sonogram Paige had handed me herself 4 weeks earlier in my own kitchen, with the clinic date stamp circled in red. "That would put conception in early February," Devin said. "This image is dated 11 months before that. Care to walk us through the math?" The room went the particular kind of quiet that only happens once or twice in a person's life, the quiet of every assumption in a room collapsing at the same moment. Theo looked at Paige, not at me, at her. And I watched something cross his face that I recognized instantly, because I'd worn it myself for 3 straight years. The specific look of a person realizing they've been the only one in the room who didn't know the rules of the game. "It's a clerical thing," Paige started. "The system reuses." "It doesn't," Devin said. "I called the clinic this morning, confirmed." Cordelia tried to recover first. Mothers usually do. "This is unnecessary," she said. "Whatever the paperwork says, the baby is real, and we should all be focused on." "Cordelia," Devin said, and set the second document on the table without raising her voice at all. "Would you like to explain these wire transfers before or after we discuss the seating chart from your garden party 5 years ago?" I have never in my life seen a face go that pale that fast. Theo turned to his mother. "What seating chart?" he said. It wasn't a question. It was a man doing math he should have done 5 years ago. Cordelia didn't answer him. She looked instead at the water pitcher in front of her, like it might explain something to her if she stared at it long enough. I didn't raise my voice. I'd promised myself I wouldn't, and I kept that promise, but for entirely selfish reasons, I wanted my voice to be the calmest one in the room, because I knew it would be the one they remembered. "I want to be clear about something," I said. "I'm not angry that you fell out of love with me, Theo. People do. I'm not even angry that it was Paige. People surprise you. What I can't get past is that I spent 3 years believing the kindest person in this family was the one who'd been studying my grief like homework the whole time." Paige didn't look at me. She was looking at the table, both hands still resting on a belly I now understood was, at minimum, a question mark and possibly nothing at all. I stood up, I took the ring off, the emerald, the one that only goes to someone who stays, and I set it on the table in front of Theo's grandmother's empty chair because she hadn't been invited, and I thought she deserved to know it had come home on its own. "Tell her I kept it safe," I said. "That's the only promise I actually made that I intend to keep. Here's what happened after, in the order it happened, because I think you'll want to know." The clinic confirmed by certified letter the following week, no record of a pregnancy at the gestational age claimed. Paige stopped answering calls from the family group chat 3 days after the settlement. She moved out of state by the end of the month. Theo filed an emergency request to pause the divorce settlement, not to reconcile with me, to investigate what, exactly, his mother had spent 5 years building behind his back. Last I heard, he hasn't spoken to either of them since. Cordelia lost her seat on the Vineyards board within 6 weeks. Family businesses, it turns out, have very little patience for matriarchs who spend the family's money curating who gets to inherit it. And me, I drove back to my cousin's place in Spokane that same afternoon, sat on her back porch, and didn't cry. I'd expected to. I'd been braced for it the whole drive. Instead, I just felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Quiet. Not happy. Not vindicated exactly. Just quiet. The particular relief of finally being the only person in a room who already knows the whole story. I think that's the part nobody tells you about getting your dignity back. It doesn't arrive loud. It doesn't arrive like winning. It arrives like a held breath, finally let go.